I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
A bombshell report is sending shockwaves through Britain's aristocratic circles following an explosive incident during preparations for Royal Ascot, the most prestigious and glamorous event of the British royal calendar. Prince William reportedly stood up abruptly during the ceremony after discovering that Queen Camilla's personal family had been given prime seats right next to the most senior members of the royal family. Witnesses described William's face as frighteningly cold. Without saying a word, he immediately walked out, leaving protocol officers in panic and the assembled nobility watching in stunned silence. The situation became so tense that King Charles himself left the central area to pull William aside backstage, as many feared an open power clash was about to erupt in the heart of Royal Ascot. When William returned to the royal box, the atmosphere reportedly turned icy. In front of senior officials and numerous aristocratic guests, he is said to have coldly demanded that Camilla's family immediately move to the ordinary public seating area or be removed from the event entirely. What could have provoked William to publicly challenge Camilla so openly at the highlight of the royal summer season and behind the closed doors at Royal Ascot that day? What other secrets might be powerful enough to shake the entire House of Windsor? June was approaching. In Berkshire, this was the time when the air always carried the distinctive atmosphere of Royal Ascot, an event that was far more than a showcase for the world's fastest thoroughbreds. For generations, it had served as the ultimate stage for status titles and hidden power within the United Kingdom. For members of the direct bloodline, every step on the grass, every nod of the head, and even the distance between seats in the royal enclosure were measured by the strict standards of loyalty and hierarchy. Prince William arrived at the event's preparations with the calm demeanor of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for the throne. In his early 40s, the air carried the immense weight of a 1,000-year institution, especially after the turbulent period from late 2025 into the first half of 2026, when debates over legitimacy and the modernization of the palace structure had dominated the headlines. His relationship with the previous generation's agenda had always maintained an invisible but firm distance. For William, preserving the sanctity of the direct bloodline was not merely a duty. It was a red line that no one was permitted to cross. He entered the VIP area, his dark hat slightly tilted, his sharp gaze sweeping over the bowing aristocracy, his mind alert with the vigilance of a future ruler. William's attention was quickly drawn to an unusual structural change in the center of the grandstand. Right beside the velvet-covered seats reserved for the highest-ranking members of the royal family places that traditionally belonged only to those of royal blood or the most senior courtiers, sat faces that did not belong to the traditional axis of power. They were Queen Camilla's own family. Queen Camilla, who had spent decades navigating highs and lows to solidify her position beside King Charles, had consistently sought to strengthen her own family branch's influence in official ceremonies since the coronation. The placement of her children and relatives in such prominent positions level with senior royals was an overly blatant arrangement. Prince William's steps faltered for the briefest moment, long enough for his trusted bodyguard behind him to notice the shift in his master's movement. His brows furrowed slightly as his gaze locked onto the polished brass nameplates affixed to the armrests of the front row. The instincts of someone deeply versed in court protocol sounded the alarm. This could not be a simple oversight by the organizers. In a world where even a casual wave was planned months in advance, moving a seating position at Royal Ascot sent a powerful political message. Discomfort began to stir and spread through William's mind, transforming from fleeting surprise into controlled fury. He realized that the strict traditional boundaries he and those before him had fought to protect were being quietly yet directly breached. This arrangement felt like a veiled declaration from behind the scenes, an effort to normalize and elevate the presence of those outside the direct bloodline, deep into the symbolic machinery of the monarchy. He stood motionless, fingers tightening around his ceremonial cane, his facial muscles tensing, as he watched the smug smiles and satisfied clinking of glasses from Camilla's family. The conflict within the heir to the throne intensified as he observed the reactions of the surrounding aristocracy. The low murmurs and probing glances from nearby dukes and earls showed that they too had noticed the irregularity. For William, this was no longer about a few seats at a race course. It was a dangerous, symbolic intrusion. If the royal family yielded even one step on the Ascot grandstand tomorrow, the order of greater ceremonies at Westminster Abbey or Buckingham Palace could be overturned at the whim of an individual. This imbalance directly threatened the solemn hierarchy and structure he was duty-bound to protect. William chose not to display his anger outwardly through words or hasty actions. He moved calmly toward a secluded corner of the grandstand, from where he could survey the entire scene without the media lenses capturing every twitch of his expression. Standing from above, he silently observed the enclosure, watching Camilla's careful gestures and skillful guidance as she deliberately drew her family into the center of the royal photographs. William's silence at that moment grew heavy and razor-sharp. In the sweltering heat of the Berkshire gathering, a cold current seemed to envelop the young prince's mind. He understood that everything was far more serious and calculated than he had first thought. This was not a fleeting favor. It was the opening shot in a campaign to reshape the power dynamics within the palace, a movie designed to test his reaction and that of those loyal to the old order. The eyes of the future king remained fixed on the opulent scene before him, recording every detail, every face, preparing a response that no one in that grandstand could possibly anticipate. The Royal Ascot atmosphere continued to pulse with the thunder of hooves pounding the racetrack and the roar of cheers rising from the distant stands. Yet in the exclusive area reserved for the upper echelon, a far more intense drama was unfolding. Throughout the event, Queen Camilla relentlessly seized every opportunity to advance her own agenda. She moved with graceful poise, her high-end silk dress fluttering lightly in the summer breeze, but her eyes calculated every camera angle with precision. With deliberate intent, she repeatedly drew her own family members into the center of attention. Whenever media lenses or high-ranking members of the British aristocracy appeared, she skillfully used intimate gestures, a touch of the hand, a warm smile, or a meaningful tilt of the head, to present them as an inseparable part of the royal inner circle. Standing at a short distance, Prince William witnessed the entire orchestrated performance with deep disgust carefully concealed beneath his ice-cold expression. His discomfort grew stronger as he noticed the clear shift in media focus. Reporters, always sensitive to subtle palace changes, began directing their cameras toward Camilla's family branch, unintentionally turning them into the main figures of the event. For William, the image of the royal family had completely lost its necessary balance. The dignity of a 1,000-year institution built on bloodline and duty was being transformed into a stage for a common family drama where traditional values were overshadowed by one woman's ambition to assert her personal status, a woman who had entered the palace through a highly controversial path. He felt a profound insult to his ancestors' legacy and the order he had spent his life upholding. Amid these dark thoughts clouding the prince's mind, an unexpected moment turned his suspicions into stark reality. While moving through the rear corridor behind the grandstand to avoid the crowd's gaze, William accidentally overheard a tense conversation conducted through meaningful glances and lowered heads among several members of the royal ceremonial office. With the sharp instincts of a palace insider, he quickly grasped the core information from the confidential documents showing the revised seating plan that they were hastily trying to hide. The changes to the seating structure the elevation of Camilla's family to equal standing with direct bloodline members were not a spontaneous diplomatic decision by the event organizers. They had been quietly prepared for weeks in advance through strict instructions and specific written requests sent directly from Queen Camilla's office. This revelation hit William like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing the last remnants of his patience. His eyes darkened the veins on the back of his hand, bulging visibly as he gripped his ceremonial cane tightly beneath his leather gloves. All previous doubts were now confirmed by irrefutable evidence. This was not an act of hospitality or ordinary social courtesy toward relatives. It was a clear and audacious political maneuver. Camilla was exploiting King Charles's tolerance and her current position to gradually establish a new power structure. She was embedding her own people into highly symbolic roles to secure a solid foothold before the next reign began. When William returned to the grandstand, his steps no longer held any hesitation. His silence was no longer one of patient observation. It had transformed into a terrifying buildup of pressure, preparing for a storm ready to sweep away anyone who dared challenge the traditional boundaries of the British monarchy. The atmosphere at Royal Ascot reached its most dramatic peak as the horn signaled the start of the most important race, triggering a wave of frenzied excitement from tens of thousands of spectators, while the upper-class crowd poured their attention onto the powerful steeds thundering down the track. And while Queen Camilla reveled in the media spotlight, surrounded by her own family, Prince William made a decisive move. Without a word of announcement or a courteous nod to those around him, he turned and walked straight out of the royal enclosure. His sudden departure occurred far earlier than the official schedule previously released by Kensington Palace. Each step the prince took across the grass carried an invisible yet heavy pressure. He refused the ceremonial car waiting at the main entrance and instead chose to walk along the private internal corridor reserved for senior members of the royal family. His face remained icy lips pressed into a tight straight line, revealing no emotion to the bewildered stares of the security staff. William's absolute silence and refusal to offer any explanation were the strongest political messages he could send to the monarchy at that moment. He understood the power of absence. In the world of protocol, the heir to the throne deliberately walking out of a national event without an unavoidable reason was a direct slap at the arrangement he considered outrageous unfolding in the grandstand. The action immediately triggered a chain reaction of chaos. Just minutes after William's car rolled out of the racecourse grounds, a wave of commotion spread rapidly through the aristocratic rows and the media area. Cameras that had been fixed on Camilla's family suddenly swung toward the now empty seat bearing the emblem of the Prince of Wales. His abrupt disappearance became a massive question mark, weighing heavily on the luxurious atmosphere of the festival. Members of the public and royal commentators present at the scene immediately began speculating and analyzing. William's silence was no longer a personal act. It was being interpreted as a public declaration of a deep rift within the palace, a powerful protest against the manipulation of power and family relations. As the royal car sped along the road toward London, William's mind found no relief. Instead, it grew even darker when his trusted bodyguard reported another confidential piece of information via the secure tablet. It was the preliminary draft of protocols for a series of national events scheduled for the end of this year and the beginning of next, recently approved by Queen Camilla's office. His eyes turned to ice as he read the note. Camilla's own family was not stopping at VIP seating at Ascot. They were also planned to take prominent roles, holding symbolic positions in many upcoming core royal ceremonies, positions traditionally reserved only for those who had devoted their entire lives to serving the kingdom. This revelation tightened William's chest with overwhelming fury. He realized that if he continued to remain silent or merely protest by walking away, this wave of intrusion would never stop. The hidden power struggle within the palace was no longer petty squabbles behind velvet curtains. It had become an all-out war to change the very nature of the British monarchy. Opportunists were deliberately exploiting the situation to seize symbolic power. The prince's hands clenched tightly, his gaze fixed out the car window toward the sunset descending over Buckingham Palace, filled with iron determination. His patience had reached its absolute limit, and he knew he had to return and crush this ambition once and for all. The sudden disappearance of the heir to the throne had triggered a silent earthquake deep within the traveling palace at Berkshire. Recognizing the catastrophic media danger posed by his son's empty seat, King Charles immediately exercised the supreme authority of both a father and a monarch to demand William's return. In the private room behind the royal grandstand, the king tried to use calm reasoning and appeals to the greater good to keep William there, hoping to spare the royal family a public scandal in front of the world. However, these reminders of royal dignity only poured fuel onto the fire of fury that had been smoldering in the prince's heart for hours. The accumulated tension reached its breaking point. William refused to compromise. He turned and strode back toward the royal enclosure with powerful steps, where the drama of overreach was still unfolding. The return of the Prince of Wales did not bring calm. Instead, it unleashed a wave of pressure that froze the entire space around him. Ignoring the probing eyes and customary greetings, William walked straight to the center of the enclosure where Queen Camilla sat with her own family. The distance between the two generations, between the strict direct bloodline and the non-royal family branch, suddenly shrank in a suffocating atmosphere. Standing face to face with Camilla Williams' gaze was as cold as a blade, piercing directly into the budding smugness on the powerful woman's face. He stood tall, his posture radiating the full authority of a future king, using his commanding presence to declare a harsh truth. This seating arrangement was a serious violation of the monarchy's highest traditional rules. In the terrifying silence of those around them, William's action left no room for negotiation. His eyes moved from Camilla to the nameplates bearing the identities of those who did not belong there. Then he gave a slight nod and a decisive hand signal. Receiving the command from the man who would one day control the fate of the kingdom, the royal bodyguards, loyal only to absolute monarchical orders, immediately stepped forward. Without hesitation yet, without unnecessary roughness, they firmly surrounded and escorted Camilla's own family out of the senior royal area. This shocking and unexpected scene unfolded before dozens of high-ranking aristocratic guests and senior palace officials. One by one, Camilla's relatives were forced to gather their belongings under astonished and stunned gazes mixed with secret satisfaction from traditionalists. They were led out of the VIP section and moved toward the ordinary public stands under tight security supervision. At the end of the direct confrontation, Queen Camilla was left in a state of unprecedented humiliation and embarrassment since the day she had entered the palace. Her fingers, adorned with jade rings, gripped her leather handbag so tightly they trembled. Her lips twitched, but she could not utter a single word of public protest. She understood clearly that in a world where rules and protocol were the supreme law, her unilateral arrangement of seating was an abuse of power against principle, and entirely powerless before the legitimate intervention of the heir to the throne. Under the harsh afternoon sun of Royal Ascot, Camilla could only stand frozen helplessly, watching her symbolic power shattered completely at the hands of Prince William. As the last royal cars rolled out of the Berkshire racecourse, night descended and an unprecedented media storm erupted across the United Kingdom. The Royal Ascot incident could no longer maintain its peaceful facade as a noble sporting event. It was now being dissected under the intense scrutiny of public opinion. Front pages of major newspapers, from sensational tabloids to serious political magazines repeatedly featured images of William's initially empty seat and the scene of Camilla's family being escorted away. Debates over power legitimacy and the future of the House of Windsor grew more heated than ever, turning the deep corridors of Buckingham Palace into a stifling crisis center. The public conflict quickly drove society into deep polarization, with two sharply opposing views. A large conservative faction and traditionalists voiced absolute support for the Prince of Wales. They saw his firm action as a timely rescue, a steadfast shield, protecting the purity and dignity of royal tradition against personal ambitions. In contrast, voices advocating modernization criticized William's behavior. They argued that the prince had been too cold and ruthless, and that publicly removing the Queen's family in front of the aristocracy was an act that damaged the image of a united royal family and placed Camilla in an undeserved, humiliating position. Amid the storm of public opinion, another unexpected detail leaked from palace insiders, further reinforcing the legitimacy of the heir's actions. Internal memoranda revealed that before the Royal Ascot event, the Royal Advisory Council had issued strict written security warnings to the Queen's office. The advisors had clearly analyzed that deliberately placing individuals outside the direct bloodline into high symbolic positions would provoke public backlash and agitate core members of the royal family. Nevertheless, despite these professional warnings, Camilla had chosen to ignore them and proceed with her risky maneuver. The exposure of this truth made the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace's headquarters even more tense and oppressive than ever. Senior staff moved with haste, meeting room doors stayed tightly closed, and communication between offices was reduced to cold official documents. King Charles found himself trapped between his duties as monarch and husband, while Camilla chose to isolate herself in her private study to avoid prying eyes. Facing that suffocating pressure, Prince William maintained a frighteningly calm demeanor. He issued no statements, letting the media storm rage outside, because he knew he had just re-established the necessary order for the future reign. The echoes of the intense media storm unleashed by the Royal Ascot incident gradually began to fade from the headlines. Yet the internal power dynamics within Buckingham Palace had been altered permanently. The confrontation at the prestigious racecourse had sent ripples far beyond the verdant grounds of Berkshire. After the days of tension and speculation, Prince William's public image had not only remained intact, but had grown significantly stronger. He now stood as a powerful symbol of unwavering resolve and quiet strength, the future king who would shape and guide the destiny of the British monarchy with a firm hand. Both the political elite in Westminster and the broader British public started viewing him with a new level of respect and admiration, a monarch in waiting who was not afraid to face uncomfortable internal conflicts head-on in order to safeguard the sacred rules, ancient symbols, and fundamental traditional values that had defined the royal institution for centuries. On the other side, Queen Camilla was compelled to withdraw into a far more cautious and restrained agenda. The bold confidence she had once displayed was replaced by a carefully calculated humility. In the weeks following the event, she significantly reduced the public appearances of her own family members at major national ceremonies and royal engagements. This strategic retreat was designed to calm the fury of the conservative traditionalist faction within the aristocracy and to protect the remaining fragments of her personal influence at court. Yet beneath the deceptive calm that had settled over the palace corridors, there was no genuine peace. The silent ongoing struggle between two opposing forces, one advocating for modernization and the broader inclusion of new family connections, and the other fiercely committed to preserving the strict centuries-old order of bloodline hierarchy, continued to flow like a treacherous undercurrent beneath still waters. William understood better than anyone that his victory on the grandstand at Ascot was merely the opening chapter. If the subtle loopholes in royal protocol were not sealed completely, similar acts of overreach could easily resurface in more sophisticated and disguised forms in the future. His mindset had now evolved beyond the heat of explosive anger into something far more dangerous and effective: the cool, rational, and meticulously systematic thinking of a true royal legislator. In a decisive move, the Prince of Wales formally instructed the Royal Ceremonial Office and the Advisory Council to conduct a comprehensive review and overhaul of all existing regulations governing positions, titles, honors, and ceremonial roles granted to individuals outside the direct royal bloodline. This was an extraordinarily bold political initiative, a calculated tactical strike intended to erect unbreakable legal and ceremonial barriers. The goal was to permanently block any future attempts to normalize or elevate the presence of Camilla's family branch in high-profile national royal events. From that point forward, every official document, every seating chart, every invitation list, and every protocol arrangement would require rigorous vetting and final approval from the Kensington Palace office, effectively stripping Queen Camilla of the independent decision-making power she had previously enjoyed. Although the Royal Ascot chapter had officially closed, it had etched an indelible mark upon the contemporary history of the House of Windsor. The incident laid bare a brutal truth: the supreme battle for power deep within the palace walls was nowhere near its end. It had simply entered a new, more profound, and potentially more ruthless phase. Standing alone by the tall window of his private study, surrounded by the heavy silence of ancient oak paneling and flickering lamplight, Prince William gazed out across the sprawling London skyline as dusk settled over the city. In that quiet moment, he understood the full weight of what he had done. He had drawn a red line, one written in both blood and unbreakable law, and he was fully prepared to do whatever was necessary to ensure that the reign bearing his name would be remembered as an era of unassailable dignity, order, and sacred tradition. After finishing the story, in your opinion, was Prince William's firm and decisive action at Royal Ascot a necessary protection for the dignity of royal tradition? Or was it an excessively cold and ruthless response toward Queen Camilla's family? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.